Hey, this is Josh, and you're listening to Getting to Ramen. I'm really pumped. Today, I kind of get to turn the mic over to Rob Walling, who is the founder of so many things. He started MicroConf, TinySeed, Drip, and several other products and SaaS companies and e-commerce businesses and all kinds of stuff. And he's somebody that I've always looked up to and learned from his podcast, Startups for the Rest of Us. And so it's really exciting to have him on the show today. I'm still planning on getting on a call with him in the future and actually doing like an interview, but I wanted to try this format, and I'll get to it really quick, but I just wanted to kind of preface with what brought this about. And so at the beginning of this month, I tweeted out, this month is January, if you're listening to this in the future, January 2020. At the beginning of this month, I tweeted out Upscribe's revenue for 2019, which was just over $60,000. I figured that some people might find it interesting, but I got a lot more feedback than I expected, and it was super encouraging. But one of the tweets, or one of the responses that I got was from Rob Walling, and he just mentioned, and one of the tweets that I got was from Rob. One of the comments on this tweet was from Rob Walling. One of the comments on this tweet was from Rob, and he was just saying this. He was just, and I'll link to it in the show notes, but he just said, "Great step one business from what I understand of it. I'd be looking to launch a second app so you can buy out/own all of your time, which is step two. Some apps just plateau, and it's very, very difficult, nigh impossible, to push them past it." So I really appreciated that he posted this, and it was exciting because that's kind of how I've tried to look at Upscribe in this last season. This doesn't have to be the last business that I built in my life's work. It can be a stepping stone and a learning experience for the next thing. So I messaged Rob and just let him know what I was going to be talking about this week, and asked if he'd be willing to just send me a clip of, in his own words, what the Stairstep approach is. And within like a day, he had recorded this and sent it to me. So anyways, here it is, Rob Walling on his Stairstep approach to bootstrapping.
Hi, this is Rob Walling, host of the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast and co-founder of MicroConf. Thanks, Mr. Anderton, for inviting me onto the show to talk a little bit about the Stairstep approach to bootstrapping. It's a concept or a framework I came up with back in, I'd say, 2011, and I kind of developed it over a few years. And in 2013, I gave it this name, the Stairstep approach. And I later presented it at a conference, and it started to kind of take shape in my mind. And I eventually wrote up a blog post about it that I published in 2015. And if you go to Google and just type in Stairstep bootstrapping, it's the number one result. But the idea behind this, it came from my own experience, but it also more so came from the experience of talking to the thousands and thousands of founders that I've interacted with through my podcast and book and blog and conferences. And the underlying idea behind the Stairstep approach is you're not trying to jump straight into doing SaaS. You're not trying to jump straight into recurring revenue. SaaS is one of the hardest things to build and grow. You'll often hear information marketers who have these six-figure or even approaching seven-figure info businesses with these huge audiences, and they try to get into SaaS, and they just get their butts kicked because it's so much harder. It is just a different animal. And so the idea of the Stairstep approach is to start small. This is what I call step one. And step one is a non-recurring sale. So it's a one-time sale item. Typically, there's a single sales channel that works, or a single marketing channel or source of traffic. And you really can't grow it once that plateaus. And so good examples of this are like WordPress plugins, where your distribution channel is the WordPress.org repo, and that's a free distribution channel. And then you have paid add-ons to that. But really, once you kind of saturate that, trying to do SEO or paid ads or things like that, direct sales, aren't going to work. They aren't financially viable with a WordPress plugin. Another example I've heard of is folks launching themes. Now, back in the day, it was WordPress themes. Nowadays, it could be, I suppose, a theme for Bootstrap. And you put on these marketplaces like Theme Forest, and then they pay you out, whatever it is, that's 70% of the sales. So again, it's a one-time sale. It's a single channel, and the economics of the product probably won't lend itself to posting other places, but it's amazing for learning. And it builds confidence. It gives you experience writing copy, writing code, doing some support. There are things that you are learning just because when you start off, you have no tools in your tool belt, and building up just a few of them kind of in the minor leagues, so to speak, it's just easier to do there. So you gain confidence, you gain some revenue, you gain experience, you gain skills. There's a lot of stuff that comes out of that. There are other examples too. I see people do it, on Amazon, maybe with a book or an ebook. I see people building up channels on YouTube, perhaps. I could see Magento add-ons. There's Photoshop add-ons. There's Shopify add-ons. There's all kinds of things you can imagine that are probably either one time or maybe some of the Shopify stuff is recurring. But the idea is these are not $1 million ideas. These are, how can I get this up to $1,000 to $5,000 a month? Just get a nice base hit that I take with me, and then I parlay that to step 2. So step 2 is that you repeat step 1, launching more small products until you can buy out all of your time. Right? So a good example of this is 3 WordPress plugins or 3 Magento add-ons or 3 Shopify apps. This brings income diversification. It gives a diversification of experience to a certain extent to learn to support and write code and manage. And then you have to start outsourcing at a certain point. It's these little skills and you're just building them as you're going. And who knows, step 1 might take you 6 months or it might take you 3 years. And step 2 might take you 6 months or it might take you 3 years, but you're learning all along the way and you're building that skill set. And then step 3 is where, now that you own all of your time, you don't have to consult, you don't answer to anyone, you don't have a boss. And now you can parlay that to step 3, which for most people is that recurring sale. It's recurring revenue. It's a SaaS app, so it's launching your Drip or your Baremetrics or your Write Message or your SparkToro. It's that app that is where you want it to get to, and it will take you more time to do this approach. But this is the approach I traveled. I started with a little app called .NET Invoice, and it was about $2,000 or $3,000 a month. And then I acquired or built a bunch of other things, and I got up to about between $10,000 and $15,000 a month, bought out all my time. And then I had one little SaaS app there, but it really wasn't recurring. It was kind of a B2C-ish thing in the wedding industry. And then got into HitTail, which was a bigger SaaS app. I took the revenue from HitTail and went to what maybe is my step 4. I don't have step 4 in the model, but my step 4 was then to launch Drip, which was a self-funded app. It was $150,000 out of my pocket, maybe $200,000, but it was all out of these other apps. The out of my pocket was out of the revenue from the other apps. And so I traveled that path, but I thought it was a unique path. And so in 2010, when I started seeing other people doing it, I realized I think this is a thing. You don't just jump to the end and raise buckets of money and try to launch WP Engine as your first app. You don't try to go launch HubSpot as your first app. Like each of those folks, I'm not saying they stair-stepped in this way, but they had prior apps. That was Dharmesh with his team and Jason Cohen. They had prior apps that they built up before they built these behemoths. But better examples of the stair-step in the way that I'm talking about are folks like Dave Rodenbaugh. You've probably heard about from Rogue Startups podcast, or you may have met him at MicroConf. He's done this with WordPress plugins. Phil Dirksen is a friend of mine who I know from Fresno, and he built up several WordPress plugins. He sold a few, and later he merged with a larger WordPress product company. Richard Chen of PHP Grid, he made the jump from one-time sales to leaving his job, and he's now launched at least one SaaS, maybe 2. I can keep going. David from Fat Cat Apps, he started out with some plugins, and he's parlaying that into SaaS, on and on and on. I could literally name 20 or 30 people that have done this, and they've done it with different types of one-offs. Info products like a book or ebooks or courses, I think, are also a great step 1 and step 2 devices. It doesn't have to be software. And that's the beauty of this, is it's really, how can I get to where I don't have to work for anyone else, is what the idea behind step 1 and step 2. And the thing is, when I was at step 1 with .NET Invoice, I invested like 2 years trying to grow it past its natural plateau. And it was a one-time sale, but it had good SEO. And that's what I was good at the time. And it was a single channel through Google, and it sold 10 copies a month, and it was $300, give or take. So it was about $3,000. It was between $2,000 and $4,000 each month. And I did some AdWords, and they worked okay, but I tried all these other channels and nothing else worked. And I was super frustrated by that I couldn't grow this app to my mid 6-figure or 7-figure app that I wanted. And then I realized some apps just aren't designed to do that. They aren't worth investing the time. And when you hit that plateau, it's time to consider, hey, is it time to jump onto the next one and build this small portfolio that, again, gives you a diversification of income, diversification of kind of skill set and such. And, so that's what I see people doing. And not everyone does this. Some people jump straight to SaaS. I think it's a lot to get into, especially if you kind of have never had a product, if you've never written online or never launched stuff into the ether of the internet. It's scary, it's scary to do. But taking the risk and doing it on a smaller scale, it proves to yourself you can do it. It proves to your spouse you can do it. That was part of something I did. Is my wife was very skeptical back in 2005 when I was trying to do this stuff, and I was wasting a bunch of time, nights and weekends, with no revenue. So by the time I got to a few $1,000, it was making our house payment. And she said, oh, well, why don't you do more of that? And so it kind of got her on board as well. So there's a bunch of benefits to it. I'll stop here because I know Josh has some thoughts on it as well, but I hope that was helpful. Again, there's a blog post. Perhaps Josh can link that up in the show notes, or you can just search Stairstep Approach to Bootstrapping to kind of get the gist of it. And I have a really poorly designed kind of stair-step graphic at the top of that post that summarizes the whole thing. So thanks again for having me on, Josh. And now back to you.
Boom. There it is. Man, that was so good. I just, I think the part that I appreciate the most is, obviously, Rob has just this, insane wealth of knowledge on this subject, from the amount of people that he's talked to and interviewed, and obviously just, doing it himself and running multiple SaaS companies. But the way that he's able to simplify it, and really make it something that's approachable. But the part that I feel like is most important and is the hardest to really let sink in, for I think most entrepreneurs, is it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Most likely your first business will not be the million ARR business that you're dreaming of. And so when you go into it expecting that, like I did, and I think most people do, it becomes so much more disappointing when that first thing or that second thing or even the third thing fails. And on top of that, you may be going through those first 3 businesses in a year. And it's the point is, and I feel like the part that stuck out to me the most in what Rob said here is that it's a journey, and it's worth the work, and it's worth the time that you put in. But there's a lot of things that I know me personally, I need to learn, and I've needed to learn. And when I look back at the different projects I've done, I've learned those things. So I've talked about Podmelon as being one of those step 2 businesses. This is something it's supposed to just help pay for my lifestyle so that I can spend more time on the idea that will become that successful SaaS company that I want. What else was I going to say? So, and so, so anyways, I know that lots of people are going to get lots out of this, and so grateful for Rob taking the time to send over this clip. But I think I'm going to wrap it up there. So have a good one. Make sure that you go check out Rob Walling on Twitter and all the things that he's got going on, MicroConf TinySeed. And check out the blog post. I've linked it in the show notes. And have a good one. Peace.